What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot to discuss with you today. We've been looking at more and more of the model runs in regards to this area of interest, and they are putting it as more and more of a threat towards land. So we absolutely need to talk about this with you guys today. If you're in the Lesser Antilles, if you are in Puerto Rico, if you're in the Dominican Republic, you're absolutely going to need to pay attention to this due to the threat that this will pose to you. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. Starting off with the National Hurricane Center's latest, what we have for you right here. This is as of 1:30. This is as of the 2 a.m. advisory. I know I'm recording this very early in the morning, but this is the situation that we're looking at this current point in time. A tropical wave located over far eastern tropical Atlantic and southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands continues to produce disorganized showers and thunderstorms. Environmental conditions remain conducive for gradual development of the system during the next several days, and a tropical depression is likely to form this week or weekend. The system is expected to move westward to west-northwestward at around 15 miles per hour across the eastern and central tropical Atlantic into early next week. 30% chance in the next 48 hours, 70% in the next 7 days. So that's what you have from the National Hurricane Center right now at this current point in time. This is continuing to move further to the west and more into the main development region as it continues to do so. So we're needing to pay attention to this very closely, and when we show you satellite imagery, there are a few things that we need to discuss in there to kind of give you an indicator as to what exactly is going on and why I'm so concerned about this. So going to satellite imagery for you guys right here, let's go ahead and move on to the Eastern Atlantic just to give you a general gist as to what's happening. So as you can see right here, this is your general area of interest right here that we're paying attention to. One thing that has really heightened my senses with this is actually there's quite a few things that is first of all, this system is further to the south than what we were originally anticipating. When we were originally expecting the system to kind of come off the coast of Africa and potentially develop, it was expected to do it north of 15 degrees north and potentially in line with the Cabo Verde Islands. We're not quite seeing that right now. In fact, where the latest is tagged right here, I believe it's around 11 to 12 degrees north. So about, I'd say, 200 to 300 miles further to the south than what we were originally anticipating right here. So that's already a pretty alarming sign right there, because not only does that pose more of a threat to land, that also moves it into better conditions for at least consolidation, organization, and all of that stuff. Looking at satellite imagery right now, it does look like organization has taken a bit of a back step and it's taking more time to organize and develop. But that's my other thing that I'm watching with this right here, because the other thing I was keeping an eye on for you guys right here is just kind of how the system is evolving. It looks like it has taken a bit of a back step as of late in its organization and development. Normally, you would look at that and you would think, oh my goodness, that's a good thing. This thing is weakening. It's taking its time to organize. It's not as organized right now. That's the problem because of what it's kind of running into. In this kind of scenario, a kind of a more disorganized mess and that is getting more disorganized may not seem like that much, but it's a scary situation where the more disorganized it is right now, the worse off it will be. And the reason I say it will be worse off is because ultimately, the longer this takes to develop, the further to the west this system will go, and kind of the closer to land this system will ultimately start to get to. The European model, for example, and we'll show you this a little bit later, kind of has the system taking its time to organize and develop until it gets closer to the Lesser Antilles, and then potentially rams into parts of the islands that we're going to need to watch out for as well. So that's kind of another thing I'm really worried about at this current point in time. This third thing I'm worried about right now is this system is in better conditions, not just in short term, but in the long run as well. And I'll go ahead and show you the water vapor imagery. It's in considerably more moist air. For example, if it was in this part of the region right here, if it was aligned with the Cabo Verde Islands latitudinally, it would be running into this dry air right here, and it would ultimately likely not develop at that current point. It would still have a shot at it, but it would have to chug through so much dry air to get to that point. Where it's at right now, it doesn't need to do that. Instead, it's actually in a pretty considerable moisture pocket right now. That's kind of aligning it right here. So this moisture pocket right here kind of acts as its little safe right here. It's a little fail safe right here. So maybe it won't develop right now, but in the long run, it absolutely will. And that's something you're going to want to pay attention to, especially in the long run as the system moves further and further and further to the west. Looking at your true color imagery right here, you're finally starting to get your first frames of the morning. There's quite a bit of Sahara dust to the north of this system right here, but it's mainly being concentrated to the north and away from this moisture pocket right here, because in part you do have a little bit of outflow that is kind of consolidating and keeping it out there, but you also have the ITCZ really starting to ramp up and kind of allow the system to kind of breathe more, develop more, and organize more as a result. So that's something you're going to need to watch out for as well. But by and large, very concerning signs early on. In this stage right now, we're definitely going to need to pay attention to this going forward. But at this current point, the way I see this is, things may have taken a back step for right now, but the longer that happens and the further west this goes, the closer to land this will pose, because a lot of the other models want this to develop early and kind of start to kind of really ramp up in the next like 48 hours or so. I'm just not seeing that at this current point based on what I'm seeing with the observations and based on what I'm also noticing with some of the ASCAT data. I know Charlie put it in yesterday in the tropical chat. It's still a pretty broad circulation right now. It hasn't really tightened up as much as what some like the GFS and the ICON have been anticipating. So that's something to consider. It's still pretty broad right now. That circulation really needs to tighten up before things can get going. So that's something we're going to want to watch here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. Now going ahead and going to your ensembles, here's your European ensembles right here. What I find interesting is compared to the 12Z from yesterday, they do take a bit of a back step right here, which I do think is kind of curious right here. And I can kind of explain to you why the European is doing that. But before we get to that, here's what we had the 12Z yesterday, just for comparison, for context, for what I'm about to show you next. And what you had was a lot of ensembles showing power. You had quite a lot of them ramming into parts of the Lesser Antilles, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic as well. So that's also pretty concerning right there. But then you had more of the ensembles mainly going out to sea and staying just offshore right here. What we've noticed with the model runs is we've noticed considerable shifts to the west, not just like little ticks to the west like what we saw with Aaron. Major shifts to the west every single time. Part of that is because it's kind of a bit further to the south as well, because there is a strong ridge over the Azores Islands that's driving the system further to the west, but also in part because the system is remaining relatively weak and is kind of taking its time to organize and develop. And every day it does that, it ultimately drives it closer to land. So let's say we see the same organization, just playing with scenarios right here, we had 24 hours. That's going to really change the ensembles. That's going to shift the models further and further and further to the west, because some of the models want this to develop right away. They really want this to get its act together and really start consolidating right away. I don't think that's going to be the case, and part because of what we just saw with satellite imagery, and in part because it still needs to deal with a few other things that we'll get to in just a second. But this is what we were looking at 12Z yesterday. What is the 0Z right here? Boom. This is what we got for you right here. The ensembles do kind of back off quite a bit, and I'll explain to you why they do. in just a second, but I do want to make it clear I do have some issues with with the 0Z, not in the short term, but more so in the long term. With the European right here, predominantly because it doesn't initialize a few conditions properly, and it really just kind of doesn't take into account a few things that I'll talk about in just a second. So this is what we have for your ensembles right here. Let's just, out of my own curiosity, look at the GFS ensembles. Yeah, they're definitely liking this a lot more. They're definitely calling for more development, but they want development to start right away. And they aren't really giving it much time for it to develop and then start strengthening. Because what you're noticing is you notice a lot of this green, which is 40 to 50 knots of wind. This happens in, let me take a quick gander at this real quickly. Let's go ahead and go to 48 hours out right here. It kind of starts to pop off right away in this run right here, and then as we get to 4 days out, you start seeing a lot of this green, like 72 to 96 hours out. I'm going to be honest, I don't really see it developing and just strengthening like that right away unless something unexpected happens. So that's something to keep a very close eye on. But ultimately, your GFS likes it, the European likes it, and all the other operational runs are really picking up on this too. So those are things we're going to need to pay attention to. Going to these operational runs, let's go ahead and show you the European 0Z. I'm going to kind of discuss this very quickly just to give you the track, and then I'm going to pick it apart because we're going to do something a little bit different. Normally, I go with the models and then I talk conditions and all that stuff. I'm going to take it a slightly different approach and just go with the European and kind of show you all the conditions with that like all at once, so that way I can give you guys can understand why I have problems with this. So here is the 0Z. A European. This system really takes its time to organize. It's still a very broad circulation, even 48 hours out, even as the GFS really starts to tighten it up considerably at this current point. It takes its time. It gets down to 1,007 millibars by about 78 hours out, so that's by September 6th. So it kind of does that, but then it remains relatively weak as it takes its time. It gets up to tropical storm strength, but you do have this very strong ridge over here, kind of in the North Atlantic, and then you have another ridge over here that's starting to get its act together in parts of the Midwestern United States. Please do pay attention to that, because that is something that you're going to want to consider. But ultimately, this system becomes a tropical storm, a strong tropical storm that is. And before we go further, where this is at currently is pretty much in terms of latitude on the same latitude plane as St. Lucia, which, by the way, for those of you who do not know, St. Lucia is in the Windward Islands, and considering that the system is that far to the south already, and you have this ridge up here, you can see where I'm going with this. And the European really does favor a strengthening ridge with this right here, around 1032 millibars compared to the 1028 we've seen previously. But then the system starts to kind of move a bit further to the west-northwest, heading towards the Leeward Islands right here, particularly Guadalupe and this island chain over here. You do have this ridge starting to build in as well, but there are a couple of, in the track and all of that, has the system really starting to ram into these islands right here and then Puerto Rico, but then it moves out and kind of becomes an open wave and all that stuff right here, and the intensity, it kind of weakens as it heads towards land. I'm going to be honest with you, the track I have no problem with at this current point. I have no problem believing this track based on what I've seen with the previous observations and what I've seen based on the model shifts. What I have a problem with is the intensity. I think the European is underestimating it, but then again, the 0Z is ensembles are a little bit wonky with this, so we'll go ahead and show you why that's the case. So let's go ahead and go back to, I'd say, about 84 hours out just to show you this. Let's start the wind shear just because I want to look at that. Wind shear I don't necessarily have an issue with. Yes, the wind shear does kind of hinder it initially. I do think wind shear will kind of slow down its consolidation, at least for the next 3 days or so. But then after that, by the time we get to 4 to 5 days out, you do have this situation where the shear lifts up to the north, and then all hell breaks loose, according to the European, within 24 hours. So you do have that happening right here. And the wind shear I don't necessarily have a problem with. And based on what I've been seeing right here, it doesn't look like wind shear is the main concern with this right here. Yeah, you do have some shear to the north of it, but if anything, that's helping enhance the outflow like I've talked about before, and before this rams into the Lesser Antilles right here. Yeah, you could see a little bit of shear heading towards the islands right now, but by and large, I wouldn't be too concerned with that in this instance. So that's not my main concern. My main concern is the dry air. Looking at this right here, taking a quick gander at this, this was at 0Z right here. Just to once again look at the satellite imagery. And just for my own curiosity, let's go back to 60 frames and give an idea as to what's going on with this. And we'll go ahead and go to water vapor imagery. Okay, the initialization isn't... okay, initialization is kind of interesting right here. It's not terrible, but I do... it's not terrible, honestly, taking a quick gander at this. But I do think they're missing out on some of the dry air. I think they have stronger than expected dry air in this region over here, as well as in a couple of other areas to the west. Than what has really been the conditions. So that's something to watch right here. Ultimately, you have it moving in this moisture pocket right here, but then you do have dry air starting to ram into this system as it starts to potentially organize and develop right here, and kind of starts chipping away at the structure. I don't necessarily agree with this for two reasons. Number one, the wind shear map we just saw, there's not going to be a lot of wind shear surrounding this. And if this system organizes and consolidates like the European is forecasting for it, matter of fact, we're looking at high-end Category 1 to low-end Category 2 strength at its peak before it gets to the Lesser Antilles. At that point, you're definitely going to have enough convection and enough organization for the system to really mix out a lot of the dry air surrounding it. Also, the outflow is going to take care of the job as well. This is dry air, but this is more mixable dry air right here. So unless something unexpected happens, I don't see dry air being as big of an issue as the European is forecasting right here, and that's my main issue with this run right here. I think it's overestimating the amount of dry air this is posing right here, so we're going to have to pay attention to that moving forward. So that's your situation with the European model right here. The water temperatures in the OHC I have no problem with. I don't really need to show you that. I'll show you that on stream tonight, which we're doing at 8 p.m. Atlantic Standard and 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and then 7 p.m. Central Time. But the water temperature in OHC, I don't have a problem with, at least in terms of tropical development. That's going to really help it and boost it as it moves further to the west. But we'll go ahead and talk about that a little bit later. Here's what we have with the GF. Actually, before I continue, I do want to show you something pretty interesting right here. So let's go ahead and go back to the 12Z European. 12Z European at about this current time, around by September 11th, it's already a 980 millibar hurricane right here northwest of the Leeward Islands in Puerto Rico, similar to where Hurricane Aaron was last time right here. What are we looking at with 0Z? Considerably further to the south. Even from 0Z yesterday, let me show you this. Further to the south. We're noticing these further south and further westward shifts with this. These are not just jogs. These aren't just ticks. These are massive shifts further and further and further to the south, and that's going to drive the system further and further and further to the west as well. Part of this is because the system's taking its time to consolidate and organize. Part of it is because we're looking at as potentially stronger than expected ridge in the North Atlantic. So those factors are what we're paying attention to as well. And that's why at this current point, because of the modeling and because of what we're seeing with this right here, I'm not quite putting the Antilles on notice, but you guys absolutely need to pay attention to this. And we'll keep you updated here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But if I were you, I would start preparing in the next few days personally, and we'll keep you updated with all the information. But with that being said, we're closing the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you'd like to help out, hang out, or ask us questions, feel free to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.